Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. We're so excited to have an array of thought leaders, innovators, and entrepreneurs on board for this panel. And today we're going to be discussing how we can build thriving ecosystems that support SMEs in Africa. My name is Ife Umuna. I'm the program lead for Nourishing Africa, a home for 1 million entrepreneurs. And today we are joined by, as I said, a range of guests that are not only leaders in their field, but are able to inspire others in what they're currently doing. And with no further ado, I'm going to introduce them. Our first panelist is C.D. Glynn, the President and CEO of the US African Development Foundation. We also have Chidema Lawanson, who is the country head for the MasterCard Foundation. We're also joined by Lesejo Seralong, who is the founder and CEO of Bokamuso Impact Investment, and Olagoke Balogun, who is the CEO and co-founder of SoFresh Nigeria. And last but not least, we have Sunday Salungwe, who is the co-founder and director of marketing and communications for Good Nature Agro. Welcome, one and all. So I'm just going to get right right into it and start off with Goke. My first question is, we know that through your, I kindly ask that while you're not speaking, please mute so that we can ensure that everyone is well heard. Starting with Goke, we know that through SoFresh, we've been able to scale quite rapidly, and we're very proud to see the growth that you've been engaged in. But what barriers did you face when trying to scale, and what barriers do agripreneurs continue to face when trying to scale their businesses within the sector?
All right, thank you, Ife. Thank you, Sahel, for having me. One of the biggest challenge was around supply chain. As you know, we have basic raw material. 80% of our raw material is fresh fruits and vegetables, and we process them fresh. We receive them fresh. It's not processed at all. So, the issues around supply chain was quite challenging and is still quite challenging. So because of the fragmented nature of the agri supply chain, SMEs, when they start, are forced to rely on the open market, the small farmers, the wholesalers, the people that bring it in. So you don't have access to that integrated, cold chain supply. So that presents on its own a challenge of how reliable supply is, how consistent the supply is, and how long they would last by the time they get to you. So at the very early stage, we had to struggle with spoilage. We had to struggle with wastage of our raw materials. And we've just had to walk through that. I will not particularly say we found a solution to it, but we'll just continue to find ways to mitigate that challenge. A lot of people talk to me and say, "Oh, SoFresh is big. You guys have 10 outlets. You should be able to have a farm partner with you and all of that." But even at the scale SoFresh is operating at 10 outlets, is still small for most reliable big suppliers, for them to supply us at the scale of what we want for now. So that was that was quite a big challenge. The other challenge was infrastructural deficit. For us, it was more around power and logistic transportation, because then we have to preserve the fruits. We have to keep it fresh, which is our promise, just like our name, SoFresh. And so we had to be heavily reliant on alternative sources of power, which could be quite daunting, not only in the cost of diesel and all of that, but even in maintenance and dedicating bodies to manage running alternative sources of power across all outlets. When we want to set up an outlet, for example, power sometimes take up to 25% of the cost of just acquiring a generator that would service each outlet. So imagine if I don't have to buy outlets, I can probably scale faster but I have to dedicate like over 5 to 6 million to buy gen, install and all of that. So those are some of the challenges that we continue to face, in this sector as a business.
Thank you. And when you think of summing of power, I would love to know from the CFO, are these challenges similar? What are the challenges that you face when scaling in South Africa? And how did you mitigate them as well?
Yeah, thank you, Ife. So when we started, Bokamoso Foods, we just realized that, a lot of farmers did not really have a platform to trade their product without really producing, compliance certificates that, a lot of the retailers would want. And in order for you to, get, compliance certificates, you need to pay up a lot of money. There's like HACCP certification. For example, if you're supplying to Woolworths or ShopRite, you need to be able to make sure that your factory is like up to specs and all of that. And so we actually saw that as unfortunate because a lot of farmers could be, potentially supplying to, a lot of these retailers and other opportunities, but the setback for them was not being able to sort of like comply and not having adequate infrastructure that, these retailers saw. And so we decided to launch Bokamoso Foods as a platform where farmers could actually bring any product in any shape and actually find a market for it. And so, the challenges are a little bit different in South Africa because I think generally the infrastructure is great. And where we operate in deep rural areas. So, to get to like the next tar road, you won't drive more than 100 kilometers. So this actually, we came up with a solution to actually form Bokamoso Foods that, that would then provide a platform for farmers to be able to trade their products, and they'd be able to focus on, producing products. So some of our products include honey, which, we actually introduced it as an alternative way of them getting additional income as opposed to just relying on sales from the fresh produce. And also, we saw an opportunity in the honey industry because South Africa in particular imports 70% of its honey, and most of it is from China. And so, honey has a potential to actually create sustainable livelihoods, especially in rural areas. So, instead of farmers having to worry about where are they going to take the honey, how are they going to process the honey, we actually signed offtake agreements with all our farmers across the country. We also made sure that, instead of just relying on a few beehive manufacturers in South Africa, we actually decided to participate in the entire value chain of the honey, pretty much by having a section where we manufacture the beehives. We actually have a factory in a village where we decided, instead of people migrating and coming to our factory used to be in Johannesburg, to look for jobs in Johannesburg, we actually take the factory to the people so people can obviously learn how to make beehives. And then we sign offtake agreements with all our farmers across the country. We buy honey from them at a competitive rate. And the good thing with honey, and I'm mentioning honey because, in relation to electricity and power, you can actually store honey for hundreds of years and it won't go bad. And so it's been great for our farmers to know that, we are buying honey from them for 70 rand a kg. We are also buying other byproducts like wax. Another byproduct that we're also establishing in terms of collecting is propolis, which is very, very good. And so that's how we've been able to mitigate and find ways for farmers to actually trade without having to cough out a lot of money to get certification. And so in terms of Bokamoso Foods, we really focused on trying to brand and trying to tell the stories of our farmers through the different products that we get from the farmers, as opposed to only relying on retailers, and making sure that our branding is on par with our international competitors, our local competitors as well.
What you discussed about backward integration, but I have a question for Chidima around or trying to figure out what challenges or why do we see a lack of collaboration between entrepreneurs in different regions and across countries? What are the barriers, and how have organizations such as MasterCard tried to break these barriers?
Hi, Ify. Thank you so much. And thanks to Sahel for having me. I'm the country head for MasterCard Foundation, and we work across 7 countries in Africa and in Canada, also with the indigenous youth in Canada. So our Young Africa Works program and strategies to ensure that 30 million young Africans between the ages of 15 to 35 actually have access to fulfilling and dignifying work. And a lot of these fall obviously into SMEs or the MSMEs. So across the region, although each country looks at any of the sectors that they focus on based on their country context. So for us in Nigeria, we're focusing on agriculture, 70%, 20% in the creative industry, and 10% in the digital economy. So you find that within that age range of 15 to 35, like I said, the MSMEs are there. If you're so we're very interested in building the resilience of MSMEs because they are the catalytic engine that would ensure that employment indices are met and even exceeded. So if we have so many successful soul freshies across African countries, he has 10 outreaches now, outlets, and then he's employing people. If he started with 1 outlet and he failed, he wouldn't have been able to open 9 more outlets and employ the number of people the company is employing now. So they're an engine for employment. So and if we look at indices from Nigeria, about 98% are in the micro segment. How do they grow to become small and medium? So across the continent, MasterCard Foundation looks for partners that encourage MSMEs to build their resilience through capacity building. So there are those that provide additional services, whether as standalone companies or we're collaborating with financial services industries to say, bundle these with your financial services of access to finance, because SMEs are struggling with understanding how to deal with their businesses. So just giving them funding is no longer enough. It's just business as usual, more or less. But if they are bundled with non-financial services, so they teach them how to go about being effective businesses. They ensure that they know about taxation, about how to even register businesses. There are many people who are utilizing their individual names to run effective businesses, but you lose out on so much. How do you ensure you're not just you're not recruiting all members of your family into your business? Nothing too wrong with that, but you can't be very efficient. Who are you going to sack? Your husband's brother? That can cause you some issues. So how do you ensure that your processes, you have standard operating procedures? So MSMEs do not have sufficient capital to be able to afford these non-financial services from other providers. So sometimes as donor companies, we work with collaborators and partners who provide these services. But there's also a space for building trust between the MSMEs and these providers, because there's this issue of, if I let an accountant to look into my business, are they going to share my details with my competitor when they go on to also be accountants for the next person who works in my space? So as an SME, I might be very wary of getting an external accountant outsources to teach me, or even get it free from donor companies like the MasterCard Foundation. So, and like what we're doing with Sahel, you launched the NourishingAfrica.com, and we partnered with you on that. This is now a space where those in agri-food businesses can come for information free. They can come for that information. People signed up here on this platform without paying anything. And that's based on the footprints we have in collaboration with you. They can find where there is access to finance. You're building this capacity building of those in the agribusiness space. They can have speaking engagements. They're actually selling to people across Africa. So, and then you asked about, cross-country. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement is going to ensure that at least there are processes in place to reach out to other countries. So if we ensure that African governments improve their ease of doing businesses, financial services can ease payment services across borders and ensure that even things that have to do with how are exports handled across borders, then we can help each other. For a Nigerian company like a So Fresh, or a South African company like a good money company, can sell to people in other parts of the world, including Africa, to ensure that it's streamlined. So those are the few things that I can say for now. I'll leave the rest for later. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask a similar question, but with Sunday, when it comes to Good Nature Agro, you have partnered with farmers, you've partnered with other stakeholders in a very different way. Can you elaborate on the successes of your partnerships with farmers within your community and the business you're trying to grow through these partnerships?
Sure. Thank you so much for allowing me to be on this panel. I'm actually excited. I've enjoyed listening from everybody, and I hope you can all hear me clearly. Yeah, so we've actually thrived at partnerships, and I think the whole of our model, the core of it is at the center of, basically, we put our farmers at the center, and we don't put them as basically, as people of production only, but they are valid past partners. So what we've done in that sense is to make sure that they have an equal share, not only in payments, but also in things like feedback, and making sure that we have sort of a human-centered design approach that allows them to help us co-create certain solutions for problems that we have in the community. So we value that kind of partnership because these farmers are continuously iterating certain processes, and they're able to tell us what's working and what's not. You realize that most of these are actually not in the formal sort of design sense, but we give incentives for certain ideas that they give. And some of these are collaborative times so that farmers can give us sort of examples of what they need. So I'll tell you an example right now. We are looking at collaborating with one of the some of the financial service providers to see how we can make payments easy for these small-scale farmers, because in the past 6 years, we've been delivering bulks of cash in the community, which is not so safe if you're driving alone and you've got a few millions of dollars in your trunk. That's not very easy. So we've tried to sort of move that into mobile payments. In other parts of Africa, that's easy. It's already been sorted out. But in places like ours, these are sort of novel, and it's not easy because you don't find, for example, the mobile service providers as readily available as you can think. The roads are not as accessible. There isn't enough proper secure storage for some of these financial instruments. So all that kind of stuff is coming, and farmers are giving ideas of how this could happen. So we are working with a good example, which is Finca, who also happens to be an investor on the investment side, but they have a micro loan option, but they also have a savings option for these small-scale farmers, and they're allowing us to sort of iterate and sort of ideate around the idea of how we can make these payments available. Apart from that, we are also trying to see how we can integrate farmers into sort of active farmer diaries, which allows them to sort of interact with some of these technologies like cell phones and sort of record what they've been doing as activities throughout the year, so we can see points of collaboration as they do that. Lastly, I think beyond just the sort of mobile payments, we're also looking at some kind of card payments, and all these ideas are coming from the farmers, so they can do a bit of savings or sort of bundle up a payment pre-season so that they can buy some of the seed or some of the inputs at the end of the year, aggregating it into those cards and making sure that they have their money both on the saving side and just buying some of this seed. And it's some of this kind of partnership that we have. Beyond just the farmers, we've also realized that, there's urban stakeholders, including the government here, which has allowed youths like myself to sort of thrive and come up with ideas that can actually be novel and impactful in these communities. So they are always on the bandwagon to allow us to somehow try out some of these things, as long as their policy and as long as they're within the policies and regulations that are there. They're not highly experimental, especially on their livelihoods. Like I said, farmers are at the center, so you want to make sure that some of these ideas are explorative. Then, when it comes to partnership, I think one of the things that will stand out, and I think that's my last point, is we've made sure that we understand the farmers' pain points. So if you notice, our statement is basically to increase small-scale farmer incomes and moving them from poverty into the middle class. And we've done this by a simple number of $600, which I think to all of us here on the platform might seem like a very small droplet. But compared to monocropping maize on a hectare with some of these small-scale farmers, they're getting $113. So when you introduce 600 on legumes and be basically part of the full value chain, from initiating the interest to agro processors who might want the seed, bundling it up and multiplying it with these small-scale farmers, so at the end are 600, and then basically making sure that you buy it from them so that they actually gain that amount, and then it's sent off to be processed. So it's a continuous sustainable activity, really changes lives. So the farmers look at that as a big opportunity for them to get extra incentives that can help them to access amenities like health, proper housing, lighting. It's really interesting. So in my last 6 years, it's been exciting to be part of seeing what collaboration could be at that kind of scale.
That's incredible to hear. CD, I'm going to come to you, and I have a question that revolves around the aspect that USADF has been one of the few organizations that works directly with cooperatives. And we know that within the agriculture and food space, they're not the easiest group to manage in terms of ensuring that the partnership leads to growth because of the various challenges that they themselves face. What are the key takeaways that you can share with us today as it relates to your partnerships with them? How can we and how can more people be engaged with working with cooperatives and working with the smallholder farmers and often rural stakeholders to ensure that we not only create ecosystems for them to support them, but that we nourish ourselves in the process?
Excellent. Thanks, Ify. And congrats to Sahel for this great milestone. I apologize to everyone. I'm having some technology challenges this morning. I'm in Washington, D.C., and it's surprising, but with the distance learning, I have my wife and 3 kids were all on our internet at the same time because they're in school, and I'm on webinars in Lagos and Lusaka and Johannesburg and all over the continent. So apologies, everyone. So USADF is a government institution, a government agency. We operate basically as a government entity that functions as a private foundation. So we make direct investments into African enterprises and African entrepreneurs to really find, to fund, and support those enterprises all throughout the continent. And we choose our areas of focus on U.S. government, U.S. priorities, but also Africa's needs and challenges. And so those areas are typically in the areas of agriculture and food security because it's paramount for Africa, and it's also very important to the U.S. government that we see a thriving, nourished African continent. We focus on off-grid energy because, as we know, 600 million plus people go to bed in the dark, wake up in the dark, and use very inefficient aspects for energy. So energy poverty is real, and ADF is on the front lines of addressing energy poverty, and we have a program in the U.S. government called Power Africa. So we focus on, again, Africa's needs and challenges and U.S. government priorities. When we think about populations and geographies, we try to go where there's a strong need, a strong value proposition, and where Africa's growth story wanted to be expansive and where people are being left behind. And if your question is really important because that's typically in rural areas. in these rural areas where people are often left behind, you really have two options for a livelihood and to improve your lives. You can use your hands. So we think about handicraft business. We think about all the businesses that women and young people and those in rural areas use. They use their hands or they use the land. And so the use of the land and forming them into, from self-help groups to cooperatives and then to producer groups to SMEs is part of our goal. We think about the development of those cooperatives. We think about the growth and expansion of those cooperatives. And ultimately, we want to scale them through linking them to stronger value chains and supply chains. And there are three critical components. Well, first and foremost, those cooperatives, when we work with them, we really have a mindset. Our approach to development is very different than most government institutions and government agencies and development partners. We start really on a demand-driven perspective. We don't come with solutions from Washington, D.C. or from outside. We meet people in the community. So it's a very much a bottom-up driven, demand-responsive approach. So Africans supporting them, those cooperatives, their ideas, their ingenuity, the things that they need from their community. So it's really a needs-based assessment. It really is a participatory approach where we give them, and we talk about them having a true voice and a choice in their own development. So really empowering them to be able to power up their lives. And so we're facilitating their development, but we're not controlling it, and we're not coming with our solutions. We're really bottom-up driven. We also are very critical that the support we give is in three phases. So number one, those cooperatives to develop, to grow, and to scale, they need access to capital. We all know that. And so that access to capital is very critical. And so that's one of the key things we do as a grant funder, providing grant funding of anywhere up to $250,000 directly to those cooperatives for capital expenditure, for productive activities, for any number of things. So the capital is important, but equally important to the capital is the capacity building. So the question around how to make cooperatives more productive is not all about giving them access to capital. It's the non-financial support, and that non-financial support helps them increase the means of production, to increase their yield, to use mechanization, to use improved seeds, to think about irrigation, fertilizers, all the technology, digitization, all the things that are needed that don't require capital. We also provide, and we also link them to those things through a local partner. So everywhere ADF works across the continent, 21 different countries, we fund about 400 different cooperatives a year. Right now, we have about $75 million invested in about 1,500 different cooperatives throughout the continent, cooperatives and SMEs. And the important part isn't our capital. The real important part is the sustainability of those cooperatives, and that's through a local partner. That local partner is not experts from, again, around the world that drop into these communities. These are local business development, business advisory, business service providers that provide project management, that provide mentorship, that provide the real hand-holding that cooperatives need to create real management systems, financial systems, governance systems, so that they can become real businesses that can be investable. So we really focus on the organizational development, we focus on the enterprise expansion, and then we focus on linkages with other actors in the value chain. And so we see our role in being catalytic in the early stage of cooperative development, of enterprise development, of entrepreneurship development, but also to grow them and scale them and link them. And so our capital, although most of it is grant capital, we know the importance of capital being flexible. And so we also are thinking about credit worthiness. We're thinking about financial audits. We're thinking about all the things that they need to be investable businesses beyond the grant capital that ADF may provide. And so we feel like this structure of providing the capital with the capacity building and then some level of collaboration and convening with others, the connections, the connecting them to markets is critically important. And so those are sort of some of the secret sauce, if you will, ingredients that we provide to cooperatives. A lot more to share, but hopefully that was a good start.
Thank you. So we have a few more minutes, and I have a lot of questions left. So I'm going to kindly ask that all panelists keep their answers to a minute and a half, so we can get to as many more as possible. But what I want to ask, okay, is where you are now, what would you have liked in terms of ecosystem support to be there, and how do we make that happen? You seem to be muted.
Right, I forgot about that. Okay, so I think it's very important for entrepreneurs in this ecosystem to be able to integrate together. So how can we facilitate, both from the government side and the private side, especially remember I talked about the fact that for SMEs they are mostly accessible to informal supply chain, and that puts a kind of challenge on how effective they can be. So there needs to be more integration in terms of how do we link, especially the small scale older farmers, to to the SMEs. So logistical support, transportation support, and the truth is that there are just some fundamental things I think governments across Africa must really look into, and one of them will be transportation. No matter the kind of efforts we make as entrepreneurs, I'm not going to construct roads to every part of the country that I need supply from. So infrastructure, in terms of agriculture, must become primary for the government. Sometimes I look at it and I think that even things like infrastructure is way more important sometimes than fertilizers. I see an obsession, with government support with fertilizer, support with seed. Okay, so they have the seed now, they have fertilizer. How do they effectively move those products around? So for me, one of the things that I would like to see change is a focus on infrastructure that enables, farm produce to come to people like us that are the processing end. That would be something that would be I think that would be very pivotal in moving, this sector forward.
Yeah, thanks. That is from the processor point of view. Something from the actual primary production point of view, what barriers do you need broken in immediate action in order to ensure that we're able to produce more and to feed ourselves?
Okay, so from the primary sector, even though I'm not so involved in the primary farming business, but you said
the question was for Sunday.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay. Thanks for sharing that part. So, yeah. I'm just gonna say, I think there's a lot of barriers. I think some of them were mentioned by, let's say, I'm just gonna sort of amplify some of those. You see, I think when you have a sensitive sector like the seed supply sector, you find that regulation becomes a big deal. So some of those regulatory barriers that are there are too novel for a traditional system sometimes. So I'll tell you one thing is that we've actually broken a traditional system of small-scale farmers cannot produce the quality of seed that these multinational recognized. One commercial farmer planting a whole 500 hectare and grow by making sure that 500 hectares which one commercial farmer can grow, can actually be grown by 500 farmers who have 1 hectare they're concentrating on. So that makes it easy for people to sort of control that hectare. And then to make it even easier, we're sharing those incomes with each of those families, and there are so many. And then it works well with our intentions of increasing the sort of incomes that they can get from that hectare of land. So, some of those regulatory issues are quite, they're serious barriers. To add a little bit on that is that, it's becoming more expensive for example, for us to sort of work with these small-scale farmers year on year. Our increase is not only on sort of the per farmer cost of production, but also when it comes to the extension providers. I'll tell you what, at the moment, we have the largest number of extension officers that are seed registered in Zambia, and we're only 6 years old. This is because we're concentrating on a large number of farmers, and each one of them is not cheap because we have to get the regulation each year, get them trained, and then renewed every second year. So that becomes expensive on running the business. So if you look at sort of the orthodox production of seed, it becomes easy because you can have one extension officer for 10 farmers with 500 hectares each. But if you are really interested as a social entrepreneur, and you know where you come from and how it could really be impactful on these small-scale farmers, you want that kind of barrier sorted out. So we don't care when we share our revenues with some of the poorest of the poor. I think another good point is infrastructure, and that's, I think that the road network has been mentioned very well there by the previous speaker. But there's also communication infrastructure, which is quite a barrier in places like ours. So on one side, it's almost like a slice between two areas. One place you can get really good service for Skype, whilst the next you can't really even make a phone call. So that makes it very hard to pass on needed knowledge unless you have somebody present 100%. So you have to really innovate in ways of making sure the farmers are heavily informed on things like market prices, certain agronomical practices, even simple things like just getting to the place the next day. It's not as easy. So there's a lot of barriers, and I'll tell you, in the context like ours here, it's unfortunate, but sometimes entrepreneurs are not as celebrated as elsewhere in the world. When you come up with innovative ideas, you threaten certain existing cartels, and it becomes a battle between the cartels instead of concentrating on making sure that your business thrives. So all those are barriers. Sometimes you can't grow because somebody just spoken something pretty negative, and it's not true, because you can actually supply quality, you can actually have the numbers, all that kind of stuff. So just to mention but a few, I think some of those are some of the problems we're getting here on the lower side.
Thank you. So CD, I want to come to you because I want to discuss the role of Nourishing Africa and how, in partnership with organizations such as MasterCard Foundation and USADF, what we aim to do is to ensure that we provide the necessary tools and resources available for entrepreneurs such as Goke, Sunday, and Lesefo, and to ensure that they're not only able to scale as individual entrepreneurs, but that their businesses can do so as well. What is needed to ensure that organizations such as Nourishing Africa are able to provide more support to more entrepreneurs that may not be as easy to identify or as easy to onboard or engage as other entrepreneurs? What do we need to do to ensure that we really do build a vast ecosystem that has several different types of players involved?
Thanks for the question. I think the proof is in what Nourishing Africa has done with the current capabilities, but as MasterCard has recognized what Nourishing Africa can do, as USADF has recognized it, it really at this point is all about more people recognizing that it is a true platform, and this is a platform need and a platform opportunity. If we break down a lot of the challenges that whether the space has, and Sunday mentioned this with information, the information asymmetry between market and suppliers and buyers and retailers, that information asymmetry exists. And, the realities around African food markets and imports, and the fact that so many African communities, and COVID has shown us this, that when we have to rely on ourselves as Africans in various cities and places, that we then start seeing the value of local food systems and the challenge that imports really bring to our food systems. And then it was mentioned around infrastructure, and infrastructure not only in roads, but infrastructure as it relates to, as was mentioned, with telephony, but also infrastructure in terms of technology, whether it's processing equipment and irrigation opportunities and cold storage, all of the information around those things. And then the reality of what you are as Nourishing Africa is a platform, but it's really about it being an institution, a true institution to support smallholders across the continent, but not only smallholders, it's about connecting funders, connecting markets, connecting farmers, and really, really looking at a Pan-African opportunity. So I think the blueprint for what the space needs lies in what Nourishing Africa is doing in its early years. And what needs to happen is more recognition of an interlocutor, a platform that's connecting all of these actors. Farmers act in their own behalf, markets act on their own behalf, financiers acting on their own behalf, but who's bringing them all together? And from a platform opportunity and a Pan-African perspective. So many times in Africa, we operate on individual markets, but I think having an interlocutor who really is looking at a Pan-African opportunity is also really, really key. And so, I think, the partnership mindset, the collaborative mindset that Nourishing Africa brings to allow funders and market makers and farmers to all see the value in one another, but also how you can bring us all together. That's a really good opportunity for Nourishing Africa. It's one of the reasons why when we were looking at our COVID response, we could make a lot of little grants, or we could make a grant and some support to Nourishing Africa to then have outsized impact beyond what we could do on our own. So I do think the recognition of Nourishing Africa as a platform opportunity for connection to accelerate the work that all the market, the farmers, the funders are trying to do is critically important. And I say this lastly, just because I come from, before coming to USADF, I was at the Rockefeller Foundation, and we all sort of said the need there was for an organization such as AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, which has the same sort of philosophy around how can we look at a Pan-African approach to African agriculture. I see Nourishing Africa in its early days growing to a $500 million organization that really is helping communities across the continent. And so I think this is the early days, but you have a blueprint that we want to scale.
That's incredible. I look forward to it. But question for Lesego in particular is that as an entrepreneur, you were one of our very first members of Nourishing Africa. And I think in the beginning, there was a sense of, we saw that entrepreneurs were very reluctant to see yet another organization that may or may not help them, because there is a general distrust for people who say they want to help, because entrepreneurship, as many know, is a lonely road. What do we need to do to shift the mindset to try and ensure that people are able to still engage with organizations that are trying to help, but also to ensure that they are not closed off to opportunities based on the past?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Iffy. I think Nourishing Africa is unique in that it really, to Manda's, Chidima's point earlier about capacity building, you realize as a farmer or as an entrepreneur that it's not only funding that you need, but then you holistically need assistance, to make sure that your business is compliant, from the tax point of view, from the marketing tax, point of view, because an entrepreneur sometimes, because we manage so many things like all at once, the first thing that comes to mind when it comes to like helping our businesses grow, we think about money. And sometimes it's not necessarily money. Sometimes it's actually like information, it's capacity building. Maybe I need to formalize my business from not having a bank account to having a bank account, and also understanding what financiers are looking for. For example, financiers they use different matrices when they actually, look at a project or a business to invest in. Whereas, an SME in Africa that's not, or in South Africa in particular, that's not formalized, they don't have a business relationship with their banker, they are automatically like excluded out of it because they don't fit the profile, even though that business could actually do well if they actually got formalized. So I think, Nourishing Africa brings a unique platform where, you bring in, different key people that sort of like share information that's much needed to the different entrepreneurs on how to better run our businesses. From marketing, last week you had a session on marketing, because you are so overstretched sometimes as an entrepreneur, you become a marketer, you become your accountant, you become everything. So, and also, Chidima earlier talked about hiring good people. What does that mean? So for someone who's like in the middle of, in Lusaka somewhere, they've never, worked for anyone, hiring good people, it's based on trust, and trust means I'm going to hire family members. So, I think, what Nourishing Africa does or is doing right now, it's actually good, because like, I know in my case, what we don't need, what we realize that we don't need is actually not fund. What we need is like markets. We need to make sure that we have all the compliance certificates to be able to like export our honey. We need to make sure that the labeling, that the borders will be looking for. Now that we're all talking about Africa free trade, it's exactly what's needed on the border, the products, the barcoding, all of that. But you'd find that an average entrepreneur would not really even think about these things because you're thinking about survival. So we have such an important role as SMEs to play in our communities. I think our impact is great. So it's going to take more than putting capital, into helping us, scale our impact. I think it's going to take exactly what Nourishing Africa is providing.
I actually had a question for Chidima, but I think she's experiencing networking issues. It is the day of networking issues across the globe, but hopefully she'll be back in time. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. If anyone does have a question from our audience, please put them into the chat box and we will get to them as soon and as many as we can. But in the meanwhile, I do want to ask Goke, we know that, it is not often the most top of someone's mind when it comes to wanting to get engaged, wanting to be employed. How have you made agriculture look cool? We know that So Fresh is very popular within Nigeria, and it is without a doubt an excitement around it. How have you been able to do this, and how can this be amplified to other entrepreneurs across the continent?
Okay, so that's a very interesting question, and I probably have a different approach. I necessarily don't think that, especially in Africa, we need to make agriculture cool. I think the focus should be to make it more efficient. I think the world has actually gone past, where you have a major part of your population involved in agriculture, and you're trying to support people, you're trying to get the youth to the farm and all of that. I actually personally think that the world has gone past that. I think what should be the focus is how can we make agriculture more efficient, so you actually have less people farming, but increased productivity. And I think that should be the focus for even entrepreneurs and the government to partner and ask how can we. I saw someone ask a question about irrigation, and I still ask myself, why is it that in 2020 Africa is still struggling with irrigation? We're still very dependent on the weather. Years that rain doesn't fall, especially in Africa and maybe part of West Africa, it's still a big challenge. Those are some of the areas where we need to focus on. We need homegrown solutions to things like irrigation. If we cannot have the most sophisticated system, can we at least get a system where people can farm all year round? Then improve seedlings. So I think things around productivity and efficiency should be the focus. And then the other thing is for people to see opportunities beyond even the primary farming. So for So Fresh, I mean, it maybe according to your work, it looks cool to be a So Fresh entrepreneur. I mean, I don't go to the farm. I get the produce already, washed, delivered to me, and so all I'm doing is basically in an air condition. So I think people also should focus on, what can we make out of this agricultural produce? That's why I said at the primary stage, what we should be focused on is driving efficiency and productivity. And the more people can come, out at the tail end of the value chain, where we can actually get more value. So the truth is that I get more value from a piece of pineapple than a farmer would get from the same piece of pineapple. So I'm able to create more economic value. I'm able to pay more people. I'm able to pay more taxes by producing a pineapple juice fresh than for someone that farms that pineapple for maybe 6 months or thereabout. So it's about improving productivity at that stage so that less people are on the farms, more people are in the processing place where we can create more economic value, and support people,
Thank
the
you. So
government
we
pay
have a
taxes
few more
and
minutes,
all
and
of
I have
that. So
one more
that would
question
be
for
my
Chidima
approach
before I have my
to
closing
that
questions for
question.
everyone. But for Chidima, can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Great. I wanted to ask, so with Nourishing Africa, we know that we will, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So we know that with the Mastercard Foundation, you actively play a role in trying to ensure that you get youth engaged in whatever you are currently working in. So it's one of your pillars of engagement to ensure that young people get involved. How do you think we can attract and ensure that we get more people into the sector, and they're doing so in meaningful ways that not only grow the sector, but grow them as entrepreneurs, as individuals, as a group of young people?
Well, I'm still testing whether you can hear me. So if I see any hands up, I'll know you can hear me. If not, then I'll take my time. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, so as the foundation, we are very intentional in looking for those partners who have capacity to scale their project and reach across as many youth as possible. Like I said, in the Nigerian environment, we're focusing on agriculture, which is where Sahel is focusing on. 70% of our work is there. So we look for those who can provide, even as Goke had mentioned, it's still important to see the aggregation of smallholder farmers, which Sunday is doing, and ensure that they give them extension workers, seed, fertilizer, teach them good agricultural practices so that they enable them grow cycle by cycle. As they get themselves out of cycles of poverty, then it is scalable, is sustainable. If it's in the creative industry sector, who are those that can say that Nigeria is even exporting its film and its arts and culture, music? Who are those that can train the next set of youth? Deploying digital technology in every sector it is, to ensure we're not just looking at affecting smaller numbers of people. Our target is 30 million across Africa, and 10 million, out of that 30 million, 10 million will be in Nigeria. So it is a really high bar, but leveraging on ensuring that the young women are also brought into the stream. So 70% of our focus is on young women, because if we think of even agriculture, we tend to think of women in the production side, in the farms only. What about the processing, the logistics, the off-taking side? How many, as Lesego's business is growing, she's one of the few. How many other Lesegos can we get to pull them out of just necessarily being on the farms to going into production, to going into aggregation models, to deploying drones to look at large farmlands, to ensuring they are utilizing the weather-based insurance, which also uses technology. So we're interested in the barriers, removing those barriers that affect young women. And in many SMEs, even when young women register their companies, you see that their male counterparts, be they spouses or brothers, seem to take over the business. So the foundation is intentional in those catalytic partners who would have the interest in building up the young women. And then we're doing public advocacy to government agencies. What are those policies that ensure that even the youth, as they go into business, they're also safeguarded? In the creative industry, we have a bit of problems, and in many other industries, how are those youth harnessed and safeguarded so they are not taken advantage of as they go about their gig entertainment or work.
I've been told
So
we
in
need
that
to wrap
regard,
up.
the foundation is intentional in finding those partners who have skills, who can ensure the young women come to bear, and that their projects are sustainable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up now and go back to the stage, but this has been an exciting and thought-provoking conversation about how we can really build an environment and an ecosystem where each actor, especially African entrepreneurs, are able to thrive and grow and create more jobs and ensure that we can feed ourselves and that we become net exporters of food. And we become the breadbasket of the world, because there's absolutely no reason why we should not be. So thank you, Sidi Goke, Sunday, Lesejo, Pidima. We really appreciate you joining us, and we really are so thankful to have you in our ecosystem and to ensure that together we can ensure that we can feed ourselves, and that is essentially the main goal of Zero Hunger. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please move